Latest edition of the Locked On Grizzlies podcast, getting your week started with a review of the Grizzlies play over the weekend, looking at some not so positive trends for the Grizzlies so far this season, and looking ahead to their game night against the Minnesota Timberwolves, an opportunity for the Grizzlies to get back on track against a team that surprisingly is more competitive than many thought they would be this early in the season. Let's get it going here on the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. Here we go.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Always enjoy that snazzy beat when it comes on. My name's Shawn Coleman. Welcome to the Locked On Grizzlies podcast, wherever you are, wherever you're listening, and wherever you're watching. Thanks so much for making us a part of your day. You can find me at StatsSAC on Twitter, the show at Locked On Grizz, the show at wherever podcasts are available, free on any platform, Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, the Odyssey app. Make sure you listen, review, and subscribe whenever you listen to the podcast. And obviously, also here on YouTube. We're entering our second month of the YouTube era of Locked On Grizzlies. And if you're listening and enjoying the show, hit that subscribe button below. Lets us know you enjoy the show. Lets others be able to find the show who enjoy great Grizzlies content, and also just makes the experience as great as it possibly can be. Again, my name's Shawn Coleman. Been covering the Grizzlies for 4 years. Your host here at Locked On Grizzlies. Your host your Grizzlies every day. Credentialed media member as well. Make sure to check out the Locked On Grizzlies podcast as your first listen of the day. But for your second listen, so many things going on in the NBA. All the latest reaction from great heroics like Luka Doncic against the Celtics on Saturday night. Make sure to check out the Locked On NBA podcast wherever it's available, just like Locked On Grizzlies, free on podcast platforms as well as here on YouTube. Well, while the Mavericks fans may have something fun to talk about from Saturday night, the Grizzlies and their fans certainly don't have too much positives to talk about from this weekend. Thankfully, the Grizzlies had 2 off days this weekend, kind of to, regroup, reload, get back going before they start, an interesting stretch of games this November. We'll talk about that, later on this week. But of course, they did play Friday night, if you want to call their efforts playing. All joking aside, the Grizzlies, once again, during a weekend game, the Grizzlies so far this year, they just seem to want to take weekends off so far. They haven't gotten to that full week commitment yet when it comes to the season. 1-3 so far this season on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday night games. 4-1 during the rest of the week. And basically what I'm getting at is that for the second straight weekend, the Grizzlies had a forgettable performance against the Washington Wizards, a 115-87 loss to the Wizards. It was very much like the Grizzlies game a couple of Saturdays ago against Miami. The Grizzlies just from the start did not have an answer defensively. Now, against Miami, it was their ability to shoot the three, as well as Jimmy Butler just couldn't be stopped. Well, on this past Friday night against the Wizards, it was a bit different setup. The Grizzlies just could not stop anyone. It wasn't as if Bradley Beal or another player unexpectedly had a career night. It was just that the Grizzlies, no matter what look the Wizards were offering them, whether it was from three, whether it was dribble drive, whether it was passing the ball, the Grizzlies just did not have an answer. And the end result, unfortunately, was a 115-87 loss to the Wizards. Now, give the Wizards credit. They're better than many expected from them, especially on the defensive end. But let's be honest, it felt as if this was a game that the Grizzlies should be able to win, especially with how well Ja Morant had played in Washington in the past. But this is a different Wizards team. And for the consecutive game, we've now seen a stretch of games where Ja Morant, he's still himself. He still is the engine running the Grizzlies. He still certainly has the ability to take over at any one point in time. He's just finding it a bit harder against a stretch of very good defenses to take over a game for an extended stretch. We've seen Andrew Wiggins, Jimmy Butler, Aaron Gordon, now, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and others from the Wizards, good, lengthy defenders who have been able to limit Ja Morant's production probably a bit longer in games than the Grizzlies had hoped for. So the Grizzlies now have a stretch in which they know teams have kind of got at least a little bit of a plan to stop Ja Morant a bit more than they used to be able to. Putting a long, lengthy, good defender on Ja to start out. The counter for that, obviously, is the Grizzlies, for Ja to make quick, decisive passes to get offensive motion going. And besides Steven Adams in the high post, the Grizzlies need to mix up their offensive looks a bit more. They're going to have to get a bit more creative. I get it's a wonderful luxury to have Ja Morant up top running the offense, being the engine, but they're going to have to mix it up a bit if teams are finding the way to stop Ja a bit more than teams were able to in the past. But the big overall takeaway in terms of a negative takeaway from this game is certainly the Grizzlies defense. And one of the trends that is starting to certainly emerge, in my opinion, what is starting to emerge as the biggest weakness for this Grizzlies team, and I don't think that many had this at the top of their list entering the season, it's paint defense. Coach Jenkins mentioned it himself. Most of the time when we talk with Coach Jenkins in the post-game press conferences, he's discussing passing the basketball. What were the assist numbers? What did we look like from three? How was the effort? How was the pace? He typically talks about those things. This time around, the thing that stood out that Taylor Jenkins talked about was the Wizards' ability to get to the rim. Now, this Wizards team entered the game leading the NBA in free throw attempts per game, but they only had 13 on Friday night. So it wasn't them getting to the lane and getting to the rim and the Grizzlies fouling a lot. It's just that the Grizzlies had no answer altering or deterring shots at the rim. The Wizards were 26 of 39, according to Taylor Jenkins' stats. They were 26 of 39 at the rim. And overall, the Grizzlies are seeing a trend where they are having a very difficult time stopping teams getting to the rim and in the paint. Arguably the worst rim defense team in the league. Coming after Friday night's game going into Saturday, the Grizzlies were giving up the highest amount of opposing field goals within 5 feet to the basket in the NBA. They also were they were 27th in terms of opponents' field goal percentage within 5 feet of the NBA. Opponents are averaging just over 20 made shots within 5 feet of the basket against the Grizzlies each game, and they're averaging nearly 64 to 65% on those shots. The Grizzlies just right now do not have an answer deterring teams at the rim, and we see it quite a bit during games. It feels like that there are more instances than there should be when players who are smaller than Steven Adams or smaller than Jaren Jackson Jr., when they're getting good positioning on the Grizzlies bigs and they're able to make shots. For instance, Daniel Gafford the other night, a player that you did not expect to really be an offensive centerpiece for the Wizards, he was a consistent force for them. Jarrett Allen, the first game of the season, his accuracy on shots near the rim is what helped keep Cleveland in the game. So that is something that is emerging as the big weakness for the Grizzlies so far this year. Now, when Adams came over instead of Jonas Valanciunas, a lot was talked about him being a defensive upgrade. But what seems to show, as some had mentioned, is that defensive upgrade was more with Steven Adams being able to do a bit more away from the basket than Jonas Valanciunas could. Of course, you felt that with Steven Adams, if defense, was in the past his calling card at times, he at least would be passable as a rim defender. He's never been, known to be elite, but he at least would be average, passable, and it's just not been there so far this year. So it's rotations, it's help defense, it's team communication. The Grizzlies are going to have to figure out, and hopefully they place some emphasis on it over the past few days. They're going to have to figure out with their personnel, positioning, whatever it may be, to do better at guarding the paint and especially the rim. Because we've talked about, don't really look too much into the defense numbers so far. Wait until we get Dillon Brooks back to see the impact that he has. Well, the thing about it is this. The impact of Dillon Brooks is more helping out the perimeter defense. It's more helping out the Grizzlies be able to cause turnovers. It's more helping the Grizzlies be able to limit the opposition's best perimeter scorer. Dillon Brooks being back does not really impact the paint defense that much. It certainly could help, as other players can now concentrate on, help defense since Dillon Brooks is back, sure. But once Dillon Brooks returns, while that should make a positive impact for the Grizzlies defensively overall, it's going to be lessened if the Grizzlies continue to struggle letting teams get in the lane and score at will in the paint. That's the biggest takeaway from this game, in my opinion. It's the fact that the Grizzlies, one clear weakness of this team that I think, unless it is solved, is going to prevent them from getting where they want to be, or at least from having an extended stretch of success, is they're going to have to shore up their paint defense in order to do that. But we need to mention a few positives from Friday as well. Zaire Williams, a second straight game with 3 threes made. He's only the 5th Grizzlies rookie to make 3 or more threes in multiple games in the first 10 games of his career. He joined Shane Battier, Desmond Bane, Juan Carlos Navarro, and O.J. Mayo. He is becoming a source of shooting success from the bench that the Grizzlies certainly can enjoy. He's been a big reason why the Grizzlies have had very good starts offensively over the past few first quarters. So the shooting success, especially from the corner of Zaire Williams, has been a great thing to see. Jaren Jackson Jr., yes, I know that many will judge Jaren by his shooting success. It was not there on Friday night, but a third straight game, in my opinion, where you have positives for Jaren Jackson Jr. Jaren Jackson Jr. played 24 minutes. He played over 24 minutes on Friday night. It was the first time in Jaren Jackson Jr.'s career he's played more than half a game in terms of minutes and had 0 fouls. That is certainly a positive. He also had 9 rebounds. Only the 7th time in his career he's had 9 or more rebounds in a game. So a few positives showing steps forward, showing progress for Zaire Williams and Jaren Jackson Jr. But yet again, the key for the Grizzlies, though they certainly are not going to shoot as bad as they did most nights against the Wizards. Kudos to the Wizards. They beat us. They beat us completely. But the Grizzlies' biggest thing moving forward is going to have to be their paint defense, because without that, with that paint defense being as bad as it is right now, usual sources of advantages for the Grizzlies that they can rely on to be able to have the advantages in games, they're not there so far this year, and a lot of it has to do with how badly they're defending the paint. I'll discuss that in just a moment. But one thing that I can tell you is this, is that if you are wanting, like the Grizzlies probably need to improve their paint defense, I can tell you a source that you can go to improve your overall experience as a basketball fan, and that's Prize Picks. Prize Picks have you ever heard of Prize Picks? It's daily fantasy made easy. I love this, and I know you will too. It's the best NBA DFS prop game on the market. Prize Picks offers more NBA props than any other DFS prop operator and offers all the superstar players as well as bench players, only recording a handful of minutes each game. Prize Picks offers you any prop you can think, from yardage to touchdowns, even interceptions thrown in the NFL. What you simply do is you pick 2 to 5 players and an over-under on their projections, and you can win up to 10 times on any entry, and it's just you versus the projected numbers. So if you want to bet Steven Adams is going to get over 12 rebounds in a game, or you want to bet that John Morant is going to score more than 30 points, Prize Picks is the place for you to go. Don't hesitate. Check out prizepicks.com and use the promo code NBA, or go to your app store and download the app today. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. So baseball is now over, but of course basketball, football, hockey, and now college basketball are all still going on. So you probably got multiple games each night that you want to watch. Well, I want you to know that there's a simple way that you can get all the entertainment you love without the hassle. And a great way to do that is to get your TV together through DirecTV Stream. It brings you live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before, so you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. That means no more juggling remotes and no need to buy another device ever again. And the best part, there's no annual contract. So get rid of the clutter and the confusion and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. Compatible device required. Contents varies by package. Speaking of great content, we always love the fact that you choose to get your content on the Grizzlies from the Locked On Grizzlies podcast as your first listen of the day. But don't forget, we just completed another weekend of football. The AFC favorites, it seems like no one really wants to step up as the clear Super Bowl favorite for the AFC. If your favorite team is a potential AFC playoff contender, make sure you check out the Locked On NFL Network podcast of your favorite team for the latest, coming off a very, very eye-opening Sunday when it comes to the AFC playoff race. For your second listen of the day, check out your favorite Locked On NFL podcast show right after you enjoy Locked On Grizzlies. So I have talked at length this offseason to start the season, so on and so forth, about the Grizzlies really wanting to focus off of emphasizing what worked for them in the past, which was them producing in the paint, them producing on the run, them producing points off turnovers, fast break points, all those different things. Those are areas where the Grizzlies were able to find advantages in the past against teams that were, less talented, just as or more talented than them. Those were the go-to areas of the game that the Grizzlies could find advantages to be able to get wins. And the thing is I've talked about that along with those hustle stats and the Grizzlies' ability to produce in the paint and at an elite level, the Grizzlies wanted to shift a bit more to where they can find more balance doing those same things, but also incorporating shooting the three better. Now, in the general scheme of things, the Grizzlies are a better three-point shooting team now than they were at this point last year. Far better. Obviously, it's nice to have a healthy roster, but the Grizzlies are in the process of sustaining that step forward, shooting the three. But the thing about it is that when I was talking about the Grizzlies improving their ability to shoot three, it was with the idea of them remaining above average to elite in the areas of scoring in the paint, scoring in fast break, off turnovers, second chance points, all those things. It was still with those things being there in mind. One of the biggest problems for the Grizzlies this year so far, and a lot of it has to do with how much they've struggled at defending the paint, one of the biggest things so far for the Grizzlies is that they have taken a large step back in terms of the advantage that they can create through those hustle stats and the points in the paint compared to last year. I'm not just talking about the fact that the Grizzlies are not towards the top of the league in each of those individual categories this year like they were last year. I'm talking about the actual differential between the Grizzlies producing in these stats versus what their opponents do. Here's an example. Last season, the Grizzlies averaged nearly 2 points higher. They produced nearly 2 more points per game off fast break points than their opponents. This year, their opponents are actually averaging nearly a point more in fast break points than the Grizzlies. So the Grizzlies' advantage in fast break points actually is now an advantage for their opposition. They've lowered their differential by 3 points. That's a significant drop-off from last year. Last year in second chance points, the Grizzlies were 2.6 points better than their opposition. They produced 2.6 more second chance points per game than their opposition. This year, it's 2.8. So in terms of Jonas Valanciunas' impact on creating extra possessions, that really has not been impacted. The Grizzlies are getting nearly the same advantage through second chance points with Steven Adams in the fold than Jonas Valanciunas. We talked about that, where Steven Adams' offensive rebounding actually was a strength of his game. So that part of things has certainly stayed the same. When it comes to fast break points, we discussed points off turnovers, where the Grizzlies were 2 points better than their opposition last year. They're now 1 point worse than their opposition. In terms of second chance points, things are about the same. The Grizzlies still get an advantage there. But on fast break points, the Grizzlies were averaging 3.6 more fast break points per game last year on their opposition. This year, the opposition is averaging nearly 2 points more than the Grizzlies per game. We're talking about a 5-point swing on fast break points. The Grizzlies getting out on the run was a clear advantage for Memphis last year, especially against better teams. But this year, it's actually the Grizzlies' opposition who are creating an advantage, and that's something that Memphis is having to overcome. But the big area that's kind of eye-opening, that's kind of a concern. Last year, the Grizzlies were the best team at scoring in the paint and were one of the best teams in the league at defending the paint. This year, while the Grizzlies are still above average scoring in the paint, they're arguably the worst team in the NBA at defending in the paint. And what that has resulted in? Last year, the Grizzlies per game scored 8.3 more points per game in the paint than their opponent. This year, the Grizzlies' opponents are scoring nearly a point more than the Grizzlies. You're talking about a literal 9-point swing in terms of points in the paint for the Grizzlies. So in every one of these areas, points off turnovers, fast break points, points in the paint. Last year per game, the Grizzlies got a combined 14 points per game. The Grizzlies produced 14 more points per game when you total points off turnovers, fast break points, and points in the paint. The Grizzlies were 14 points better than their opposition last year combined between those three statistics. This year, the Grizzlies are a negative 3 points. So you're talking about nearly a 17-point swing. Now, the math doesn't typically work out that easily, but my overall point is this, is that those categories last year, those areas, aspects of the game last year, where we showed that when the Grizzlies were good and fresh at the first of the season, they were winning games because they were outproducing teams in these aspects of the game. When they tired down due to playing a condensed schedule, life became a bit harder because they couldn't create advantages in those areas. Well, this year, yes, the Grizzlies are shooting the three better, but they're also not necessarily defending the three at a high clip either. So the overall advantage for them shooting the three is not yet where they want it to be. So the hope was that though the Grizzlies are shooting the three better, they at least can rely on what they naturally were good at, which is creating clear advantages per game in terms of points off turnovers, in terms of points, on fast break and points in the paint. And those advantages are not there. When Dillon Brooks comes back, that should help things out a little bit. As things begin to normalize over bigger sample size, those things should help out a little bit. But though the Grizzlies are shooting the three-point ball better, and overall their half-court offense has looked better at times than it has in the past, the strength of this Grizzlies team still remains what they can do in the paint on both ends of the court and also them getting out on the run. If those advantages, if the Grizzlies cannot create an advantage against their opponents on the run and in the paint, no matter how well they shoot the three, it's going to be hard for them to be able to sustain long terms of winning success even when Dillon Brooks comes back. So again, it's early season. We still haven't played. Tonight is the 10th game of the season for the Grizzlies. So take these numbers with a grain of salt. But if we want to know the reason why the Grizzlies have a great performance followed by a horrible performance, a great performance followed by a horrible performance, is because they're so polarizing from one game to another. But teams right now are beating the Grizzlies at the things the Grizzlies are the best at, that their roster is the best at, the hustle opportunities as well as in the paint. If the Grizzlies want to get to where they can be able to sustain success over a long stretch this season, shooting the three well is going to be critical to that, but also getting back to finding advantages out on the run and in the paint, two areas where this team naturally should be good at. Finding advantages once again in those areas is going to be critical. Otherwise, it could certainly be a season-long theme where we see very good and very bad performances. But at the end of the day, the Grizzlies are just kind of staying, pretty much around 500 due to the fact that however good they look on offense, it has a hard time of really taking over versus them giving it back on defense. So yes, the Grizzlies shooting and defending the three. It's as important as ever for this team to take the next step. But it's also critical that the Grizzlies get back to finding advantages at what they're good at, out on the run and producing in the paint. And if they can do that, that should provide us with more consistency in terms of winning success. But of course, the great thing would be for the Grizzlies to be able to start doing that tonight. That's correct. For the Grizzlies to start finding success tonight when it comes to the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Timberwolves started off very good. They kind of slacked off a bit since then, and the Grizzlies should be able to find success tonight offensively. The key is going to be if that defense can step up like it has despite recent blowouts that the Grizzlies have suffered. Before we get to that, though, another thing that I want to talk with you about when it comes to the Grizzlies, as well as yourself, is obviously one of the big things is that what makes the Grizzlies so good in the paint and on the run when they're going well is that they have options. It could be John Morant, Tyus Jones, DeAnthony Melton, now Desmond Bane, even, or others that can help the Grizzlies out on the run, or obviously when it comes to producing in the paint. Well, if you want options to make your day better, especially when it comes to your daily diet, Built Bar is a great option to go with. You can have it in the morning for breakfast, have it in the afternoon as a snack. It adds health. It tastes great. It's a great benefit to your day. But the options come into play when it comes to the different flavors. Over 18 different flavors to choose from when it comes to Built Bar. And if you go to Built.com right now, not only can you choose whatever flavor you want, you get 15% off those orders of Built Bar when it comes to, or 15% off your next order of Built Bar when it comes to entering the promo code LOCKED15 when you go to Built.com. You can go to Built.com, choose whatever flavor you want, put in the promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your next order from Built Bar. Later on this week, when it comes to the Locked On Grizzlies podcast, the Memphis Hustle season has started. And though the Grizzlies, the best talents for the Grizzlies are obviously all playing in Memphis, there is plenty of talent to certainly monitor that could play a somewhat relevant or significant role for the Grizzlies later on in the season if injuries were to occur. Who could step up and who could really stand out in the Memphis G League team's season this year? We'll have friend of the show, Grizzly Bear Blues on Brandon Abraham, in my opinion, one of the best G League coverage guys around. He'll be kind enough to join the show later this week to discuss all things, not only Memphis Hustle, but the G League as well. An exciting alternative to the NBA this year that we all can enjoy whenever we want to by going to South Haven or obviously watching any of the Memphis Hustle or G League games you can get however you watch your games. But Brandon Abraham will be with us later this week to discuss all things Memphis Hustle and the G League. So obviously the Grizzlies have had a defining theme of the season so far for the Grizzlies is that after they have suffered big losses to Portland and Miami, they came back after Portland the next night and stunned Golden State. After, getting blown out by Miami, 2 weekends ago, the Grizzlies came out and beat a very good Nuggets team 2 wins in a row. Well, once again, the Grizzlies have been blown out in a game, and this time it was against the Minnesota Timberwolves. However, Memphis should have an opportunity to get it going tonight against Minnesota. But there's a very unique team in Minnesota, one that started off the season very good, looking very competitive, but since they've kind of tapered off. But the key with Minnesota is this. Right now for this team, which in and of itself is a very young team, there is quantity over quality. Number one, they're a top 10 team in the NBA when it comes to pace. But the Minnesota Timberwolves shoot more threes per game than any other team in the NBA. Now, they shoot more threes per game, and they are making threes in an above average clip, but they actually are 27th in the NBA in accuracy. Overall, they are a bottom 5 team when it comes to field goal percentage, but are a top 10 team when it comes to field goal attempts. Quantity over quality. And the thing about it is this, is that you can preach quality all day long, but there also is value in quantity in the NBA, especially when you consider the fact that while the Timberwolves struggle shooting the ball, and they do shoot a lot of threes, they also get extra possessions because they're number one in the league in terms of forcing turnovers per game. This Minnesota Timberwolves team forces over 19 turnovers per game against their opponents. They also are very, very good. They're the second best team in terms of offensive rebounds per game. So this Minnesota team is a very unique but fun setup. You're going to get a lot of action. You're going to see a lot of three shot, but you're also going to see plenty of opportunities for this Minnesota Timberwolves team to be out on the run. It sounds similar to what we see from the Grizzlies at times. But the reason why I bring this up is for a few reasons. Number one, we know that the Grizzlies are susceptible. We've seen it happen against Miami. We've seen it happen against Washington. We've seen it for stretches happen against Denver and against Portland. The Grizzlies have unfortunately had a habit of letting teams come into games against the Grizzlies that were struggling to shoot the three. They all of a sudden find success because the Grizzlies are either leaving open threes open or contested threes are just falling. The big thing that the Grizzlies are going to have to do in this game, especially when it comes to Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns, they're going to have to defend the three-point line well. That's what they're going to do. I know that I just preached about the Grizzlies doing well in the lane, but this Minnesota team is going to emphasize shooting the three, especially with how other teams that have struggled shooting the three so far this year, once those teams play the Grizzlies, they all of a sudden had a breakout game. Minnesota is going to be looking to do that exact same thing. So the Grizzlies have got to put a heavy emphasis on running Minnesota Timberwolves players off the three-point line, but in general, guarding the three-point line as well. But we just talked about how the Grizzlies' advantages in areas on aspects of the game where they're out on the run or they're out in the paint, those parts of the game that can create extra possessions. The Grizzlies are not creating the advantages this year that they did last year. Minnesota is going to be one of the biggest tests on the Grizzlies in that exact area. Getting out on the run due to creating turnovers is a part of Minnesota's game plan. For all those threes and all those shots that they miss, they make up for it by getting high percentage shots off turnovers, or they make up for it by getting a lot of offensive rebounds. If the Grizzlies are going to win this game tonight, three things are going to have to occur. They're going to have to defend the three-point line well. They're going to have to prevent Minnesota from getting offensive rebounds, which I feel like they should be able to do, especially with Steven Adams' ability on both ends when it comes to the boards. But the Grizzlies are also going to have to take care of the basketball. They are absolutely going to have to take care of the basketball. They've not been that bad at committing turnovers in terms of the Grizzlies, but the Grizzlies have had games this year where teams have been very good at converting turnovers into points. The Grizzlies have got to make sure that is not a source of success for Minnesota tonight. Obviously, if the Grizzlies can shoot the three ball well themselves, that certainly does work. And the Grizzlies, once again, should have an opportunity to be able to find success in the lane. But defending the three well, taking care of the basketball, and rebounding well are key aspects. Now, of course, when it comes to Minnesota, one thing to watch before the game is, will D'Angelo Russell be available? He was not available in the Timberwolves last game. Will he be available? We'll obviously see that as we get closer to game time. But the other thing that I will say is this that stands out is that even if, whether or not D'Angelo Russell plays or not, another key aspect for this game to watch is we know that the Grizzlies are going to have to contend with Karl-Anthony Towns. Kind of like Nikola Jokic, Karl-Anthony Towns is going to get his. You just deal with that. You try to limit it, but you deal with it. The Grizzlies have done a very good job in the past of limiting Karl-Anthony Towns from really having good shooting success. Doing that again tonight would be grand. But the Grizzlies also have to make sure that one of them, Malik Beasley, Anthony Edwards, or D'Angelo Russell, they got to make sure that one of those players do not step up and ultimately decide the difference. There was a game last year where the Grizzlies were playing in Minnesota that for the first 3 quarters of the game, I believe D'Angelo Russell, I believe it was Russell, Beasley, and Towns, they combined for like 75 total points through the first 3 quarters of the game, and Minnesota had like a 10 or 11 point lead. Well, the Grizzlies came back in the fourth quarter because they had tremendous offensive success, but they also limited the production of those 3 players. In this game, Karl-Anthony Towns will be one of the best players. That's an automatic. The key for the Grizzlies is that after Karl-Anthony Towns, can Ja, can Jaren, can Melton, can Bane, those 4 players step up and have good offensive games. But the key to tonight's game, in my opinion, is going to be Steven Adams. Not only in terms of defending Karl-Anthony Towns as well as he can, and I'm sure Jaren's going to get opportunities as well, but defending Karl-Anthony Towns, staying out of foul trouble, passing the basketball, obviously, but for me, Steven Adams' ability to get rebounds, but also seeing if there have been some adjustments made to his defensive approach to where he could be put in a better position to alter shots at the lane. Steven Adams, it may not show up in the box score, but for the Grizzlies to get the win tonight, I do think something that needs to stand out is people walking away from this game. Steven Adams looked good tonight. Steven Adams was the reason why it played a big role in this Grizzlies win. Even if it didn't seem like it in the box score, when you watch the game, Steven Adams made an impact. That, I think, is going to have to stand out tonight. So again, defending the 3 well, taking care of the basketball, as well as rebounding are the 3 big aspects for the Grizzlies. But also Steven Adams stepping up and contributing in multiple ways, and the Grizzlies doing what they can, whether or not D'Angelo Russell plays or not, doing what they can to make sure that Beasley or Russell or Edwards don't clearly have a tremendous game supporting Karl-Anthony Towns. If the Grizzlies can find success in multiple areas that I just mentioned, I think that along with Ja Morant having a bounce-back game of his own and the Grizzlies hopefully finding some good success shooting the 3, they should be able to get back on the winning track tonight. It'll be fun to see if the Grizzlies could do that, being 6-4 through this tough part of the schedule. Again, while there are clear areas of need and there are some concerning trend for this Grizzlies team, starting off 6-4 against this schedule, I think is about as good of an outcome as you can ask for. Hopefully, the Grizzlies will get it done tonight. Of course, on tomorrow's edition of the Locked On Grizzlies podcast, we'll have the reaction to the Timberwolves game and also an outlook for the month of November, a month that while at the start of the season, it may have seemed like it would have been a bit of a more manageable opportunity compared to the Grizzlies' start in October. This November month could be a bit tougher than expected, but if the Grizzlies can get going right in certain areas, they can certainly make the most of it. So we'll have the reaction to tonight's game as well as a November outlook on tomorrow's edition of the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. Make sure you check out the podcast wherever it's available for free. Listen, review, subscribe. Also, check it out right here on YouTube. My name's Shawn Coleman. Hit that subscribe button below. It's been a pleasure being with you. We'll talk to you again soon. Go Grizzlies here on the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. Have a great day.